we want to start with a different style of presentation. We want to start with a more indigenous method for knowledge production and understanding the world with all of you today. And then if we have time, we're gonna go to a more like structured academic way of sharing knowledge. But I wanna share a little bit of my experience living and working with the Kaiabi indigenous peoples of the Xingu Park. Also, they have the two other areas in the Amazon, as maybe you read in the first paper, in the 2014 paper, I talk about that. And it was the first research that was done comprising the three groups. It was also the first research that included more the voices, and could include more, but the voices and knowledge of the women, of the Kaiabi women. So in many ways, I think that the research, I don't wanna, say that my research is really awesome, but it was kind of the first anthropological research that brought these dimensions and also brought a mixed methods approach to understanding indigenous knowledge dynamics and how it changes through time through distribution of knowledge and semi-structured interviews that I did with different peoples. So I think that was important as well because it brings that other aspect to anthropology that enriches this discipline with another perspective. And I'm going to start by telling this story to you. This story was told by an elder in the Kaiabi village many years ago, but this story is a myth, but it's also very current. And maybe we can have a little discussion after the story of why it is a myth that is an ancestral knowledge. It has a lot to do with identity, territory, but also maybe modernity. Maybe nowadays it's still current. And why is that? So I want you to also reflect while we tell the story, while we work through the story, of some aspects that might interest you and might bring you a connection between the past, the present, and maybe even the future through this story. Okay? So the serpent and the stolen design, a Kaiabi myth. Tuyararé was this great shaman and a brave warrior as well. He loved to travel, go to war, and discover new things to tell his people. Once upon a time, he, with a group of people, went on an expedition to the Xingu River. They did not inhabit the Xingu River at that time. So they went in this expedition. The Xingu River is called Wuwa'u, which means the river of the wild cane, to make arrows, to collect arrow cane. During his travel, he discovered many natural resources important for the Kaiabi. I can see the map there. Well, but unfortunately, many people died during this travel. And until only Tuyararé was of that group, the initial group. First, people were attacked by the giant mosquito. Oh my God, horrible. Then, in another campsite, people were sliced in pieces by the terrible snake machete. Tuyararé walked and traveled day and night with no rest until he reached the Xingu River. He was very tired, needing to rest, but he had no hammock. He saw a bird named Jao sleeping in his hammock, and he said to the bird, "Please, Grandpa, let me in your hammock. I'm so tired." And the bird said, "No way, you're too big. Keep away, keep out of my hammock." And he insisted, and the bird denied, and he insisted, and the bird denied, until he took the bird's hammock and the bird flew into the other side of the river. But the hammock was all ripped, and so he had to sleep in the cold anyway. I mean, it was cold at night. All he could hear was an owl singing her sad melody. He was really homesick. So sad. Next day, He asked many animals to cross him to the other side of the river, but he could not trust any one of them. So he decided to cross with the alligator. It was scary, but the gator was his last hope. When he got on the other side, he walked and walked until at nightfall he met a big frog. Huge, huge. The frog moved his face to the direction of the Kaiabí village. And it spelled out the name of the river where he lived. He tried to talk to the frog, but he did not answer. The next day, he started to walk in the direction that the frog indicated. He met a lot of plants and animals in his way, such as termites and bamboo clusters. And at night, the right-hand tree started to talk to him. Come and take out the slit of my eyes, the slit of my eyes. He collected a lot of resin. That was the resin that was produced by the tree, put in his basket made of vines, and continued his way back to his village. He had already spent many years traveling, and unfortunately, his wife had married another man. Too bad. He continued his way through the jungle. At night, as usual, the white turtle started to talk to him, but he could not understand. A heavy rain was falling. Heavy. In the morning, he ate the taro and collected some to take with him until he arrived in a very strange village. It was the snake's village, the anaconda. He was caught inside the snake's house, trying to distract her attention and calling the names of the animals, saying that they would come to rescue him. So she would be like distracted. She kept replying, saying she had already eaten all of these animals, so she wasn't scared. When it was close to dawn, he called the name of the acawan, the laughing falcon, and the great hawk that is very famous for eating snakes. He imitated the hawk's voice. The serpent was frightened by that sound, and Kaiabí has his chance to escape the house. But before he left, he took a piece of the snake skin that was woven into a basket and was hanging from the wall, and took it with him back to the village. He went back to his village bringing all of these novelties to his people, and he learned to weave the designed baskets and taught the Kaiabí how to do it from that piece of skin, snake skin. And this knowledge is kept until nowadays. And he was so good that his wife got back to him. Yeah. So that's the story. And so now I want to have like a little bit of a discussion, also thinking on the article that you read. Felipe asked me to bring some things that will be like representing what we read and the articles and the study that was done with the Kaiabi baskets. They are very unique. They have this technique that they paint the baskets after they are woven, and then they scrape the surface with a little stick, and so it makes the design appear, because the dye that is collected from this tree, a resin from a tree, Cariniana tree, it only sticks to the rough side of the bind that they use to weave. So it is very interesting. It's very prized. among the Kaiabi, and it has this symbolic language that is not a language, but it is a language of symbols that they use to remember the stories and to reinforce their identity. They have innovated a lot throughout the years. As maybe you read, they have started to weave, for example, these straps for carrying babies. I carry my baby in this strap, and I have to tell, if you have a baby, you should go there and buy one. This is kind of small for me, because I don't know why. I can tell. But so the baby goes here, right? And so it's very convenient because you have the hands are like free. And so they also weave these patterns. This one is called corn seed. Each pattern has a name and a meaning. And this was also, they had workshops for the revitalization of this knowledge that they asked me and other people, other practitioners that were working for the ISA NGO at that time when I was living there, to participate in these workshops that we promoted. We had some projects that we were approved at that time. And so this was a little bag that I wove, but I have to get a lot of help from my indigenous teacher, and she actually finalized it for me. Like Marianne said, I cannot claim a lot.
What's the name of the carrier? The name carrier? What's it called?
Tupai.
Tupai.
Tupai in the indigenous language. And this is like a little club for babies. And they gave it to my son when he was born, so I keep it. That's very simple. And also they weave the patterns in. And they sell these things, so it's important because they have their market there. So some of the other publications, and this is a book that we organized that has the map of the Kaiabi ancestral area, and it shows also the cultivating and the crop plants. We have another story about the crop plants, maybe in the future, or I can share it if you want to send it. So I just wanted to discuss, I wanted to use this myth and this story to discuss some aspects that are linked to theory, that are linked to how knowledge is produced or co-produced with indigenous people, some of the challenges that we have, and what the myth tell us. So I wanted to ask you, what is your interpretation of some of the events that happened in the story, and if you could connect them to issues of identity or issues of territory or issues of knowledge production and knowledge creation and sharing, if you had any insight.
Simone, the Kaiabi youngsters, do they still do storytelling? Is it a common practice? Because I know that some indigenous community storytelling sort of fading away in some areas. Is that the opposite with Kaiabi or the group that you work with?
Things are changing really fast. And when I was there in 2012, returning the results of my research, there were a lot of evangelic groups already living in the village. Some of the groups were converted to evangelic religion. So this is a huge problem, is another topic that we need to talk about, paying more attention. And that is kind of difficult because if evangelic or even the Catholic religion, when they come to the villages and they distribute Bibles or things like that, then those stories kind of start to travel on the next ones that are kind of not very transmitted anymore. But one institution that I think that can help is the schools, the intercultural schools, because in many intercultural schools in the Xingu Park, at least with the system that ISA helped to implement, and then SEDUC, the state secretary for education of Mato Grosso State, also had many projects on intercultural education, is to promote those stories and to bring them to the classroom and the elders to tell the stories. So I think that should be more supported. But it's a challenge to keep that oral transmission nowadays with the, cell phones, technology, everything. So how do you do that? It was just one thing I wanted to highlight, that many of the insights I had during the research was due to this story and the myth. And one of them is this mnemonic aspect of knowledge and how you learn from others by copying. Like when we produce knowledge in academia, you're always reading things that other people wrote and you are reinterpreting them or recreating them in another way in your own research. That's kind of, we always are learning from the ancestors, right? Being them scientific ancestors, indigenous ancestors, or your own family or your grandmother. But we are learning as the humanity, as the collective, from the ancestors. And the way that he learned copying that snake skin made me think about that. And then we started to take pictures in every village of all the baskets, and including in museums, and brought back that. We brought those photos to them. And then from the photos of the museums and the materials in Brazil and in museums outside Brazil, including the Museum Nacional, that was where we have those photos, they started to teach and use the photos to learn again. So it's like the pieces of skin were given to them again through the photos, and then they started to be able to learn again just looking at the photos. Some of them could learn. So that was something else that I wanted to mention, came from the story.
Well, thank you very much, Simone.